Radio Spätkauf. Berlin news in English.
It's March 24th, 2024. This is Radio Spätkauf, Berlin's news podcast, recording live at the Amerika Gedenk Bibliothek in front of a wonderful audience who are going to break rules right now by making noise. Oh, wow. Okay. I am Daniel Stern.
I am Izzy Choksy.
And I am Matilde Kaiser.
So on this episode of Radio Spätkauf, we delve deep into the last year of the black-red city government. Also updates on the gates around Görlitzer Park. We hear a very familiar voice who's here to tell us about a tree. And we chat with the head of public services for the ZLB about libraries in Berlin. And find out if your ecstasy is safe.
Awesome. Guys, welcome to the show. Here's our live audience, by the way. I did that part, didn't I?
You did.
I'm a little wound up. I'm like very excited to be here. This is like my home library.
I feel bad because I never ever go to libraries in Berlin, and I should start.
Hey, well, you don't have to go to the library to use their services. In fact, today I downloaded an audiobook for my child to listen to while I forced him to eat food.
I wish somebody would make me listen to an audiobook and force me to eat food.
Yeah.
That sounds like the best Sunday morning I could possibly imagine.
It was gnocchi. If that helps at all.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, honestly, I also use it to do research for this show because you can read newspapers. Yeah. $10 a year.
All our lives are going to be changed by this information shortly, but let's get ready for some news.
Sure thing.
We don't have time for banter. Okay. The techno gets its dues as a distinct and intangible cultural heritage item according to UNESCO this month. The cultural wing of the United Nations named Berlin techno on its list of intangible cultural heritage items for Germany. The naming follows a campaign started by some of the original organizers of the Berlin Love Parade, who are now part of Berlin's Clubkommission. The announcement was greeted with major excitement from the clubbing and techno community, who hope that this recognition will increase access to government funding and better legal protections for clubs. But we'll see about that, shall we?
If you look up the other 33 like UNESCO World Heritage sites in Berlin, it's just like, it's museums, it's palaces, it's a park. I mean, they throw Sanssouci in there. I don't know if that's really Berlin in the list, but it's like everything on the list is very old. There's a couple of cool social housing buildings or whatever.
But nobody, like techno is much more part of the fiber of Berlin.
Yeah.
And the day-to-day life of Berliners. I mean, not mine.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the...
But I mean, I do see other people enjoying it. I do
Right.
see that. I just don't.
Yeah.
But the culture that people experience in Berlin today that makes it so attractive for people to come in their thousands, and tourism and also from all over is I mean, one of the major aspects is techno.
I don't want to like. I'm going to talk about it like a million times in the episode today. But if anyone has watched the documentary series Capital B by Arte, it does make you feel like, oh my God, the techno's got to be UNESCO World Heritage because it was so part of the underground and they hated it and they tried to push it down. But it's the reason why people came to Berlin. So the big growth of the city that they wanted to have, that the CDU wanted this big growth, techno gave it to them and they didn't even know it.
Right, and so now it's protected, which is great. One of the reasons I came here was the cheap rent. So could we also get UNESCO World Heritage for that?
No.
But speaking of things that may well drive rent up, Berlin's Oranienstrasse was named by Time Out this month to be the 12th coolest street in the world. The list was 30 names long, and Fifth Avenue made it to the top 5, Bree Street in Cape Town, and Melbourne's High Street also.
We'll take it. The M29 is going to be the coolest bus, the 12th coolest bus in the world.
I mean, the M29 might be the coolest bus in Berlin.
The M29 is a very cool bus. I had a friend who went on a first date just riding the M29 from start to finish. At the top, in front of the windows.
Oh
it's a
my
long
God.
date,
what
but
a
it's
move.
a good date.
Now, was that their idea or
It was decided communally.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Was there a picnic involved?
They just sat and talked and looked at the route.
Wow, you got to have a lot of confidence in your ability to make conversation
I know.
there. I mean, I guess it's sort of a movie going by. What else is in the news?
Weed legalization passed its last legal hurdle in the Bundestag and Bundesrat this month, which means in concrete terms that weed will be legalized from the 1st of April. The basics are people will be able to carry 25 grams on their person, but you can grow up to 3 plants in your own home, but only have 50 grams of dried weed in your own home, 25 grams outside of your home. So if the 3 plants produce more than 50 grams, you have to get rid of the extra 50 grams so that you can only have 25 outside of the house.
Only once they come out of the plant.
Yeah, once they come out of the plant.
Yeah.
On the plant, you can have more than 50 grams. Off the plant, only 50 grams.
What I find hilarious about this law is it's so bloody German. Like, it's not just like, we're going to legalize weed, guys. You can have your wonderful, weed culture and just go and smoke anywhere. It's the most restrictive legalization of anything that has ever happened.
There's 50 meters, there's 100 meters. If there is a child in 100 meters, you must run 50 meters
shop.
away.
It's
it is not
club.
a shop. And if it's a club, but then there is a kita, so the club can't be near. So, okay,
you can't smoke on the club premises, but
and
you can
if you have a balcony that's close to a kita, you must smoke on the other end of your house.
To be fair, they haven't worked out all the details yet either. Another rule is between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., you cannot smoke in a pedestrian area. Which
is good that we don't have any in Berlin. Win-win.
That's just Bergmannstrasse, I think, is what they were doing there.
So it's just for Bergmannstrasse. Everywhere else, you're fine.
I did find online there's an interactive map where you can go and see there's little red dots around everything you're banned from. So my street, guys, sorry you can't smoke on it. Although it does use, I'm not sure, like there is loose terminology when it comes to this, right? They say consuming, which if you have like a lozenge, I mean, if no one knows you're consuming and it's site-based,
It feels like one of those things that is never going to be enforced.
They cannot.
Right.
No.
It wasn't really enforced when it was illegal.
I'm sorry, but can you imagine, like, people are going to go to the Ordnungsamt and they're like, okay, we're going to do a Schulung today. Okay, everyone, how many meters away from a kita? How many meters away from a child?
Yeah.
How many grams outside the house? How many? And they're just going to be like, no.
There is like a lot more details going to come once we introduce like retails. They also have no idea like how to enforce the intoxication of it either. So you can get pulled over if someone's drunk. We know how to figure that out, but we haven't figured out how, or at least Germany hasn't figured out how to enforce whether or not you're too high to drive.
But what I'm personally excited about is the legalization of THC and anti-pain creams. So for anyone with joint issues, it's gonna be good, baby.
Joint issues need joint solutions.
Okay, let's move on.
So, moving on, the erection of some stone statues on the Humboldt Forum has caused a massive stir in recent days. So there are 8 statues, 3 meters high, and each weighing around 3 tons, that were put around the cupola of the Humboldt Forum last week. They are made up of Old and New Testament prophets and are part of the palace ornamentation. The palace decoration is largely paid for by private donors rather than the state, and this includes the ornate facade, the cupola, and the decorative statues that have been largely paid for by these private and largely unknown donor sources. In the past, eyebrows and temperatures have been raised by the inclusion of overtly Christian iconography, like a quote from a past Prussian king informing all in the Prussian kingdom to be fearful of the one true Protestant Christian God. Many believe that the donors themselves are steering what kinds of decoration is ultimately decided on, and a recent investigation of those donors has shown that some of them have extreme far-right views. Hans Ulrich Kopp, for instance, was part of the Wannsee 2.0 talks last November, where right-wing extremists came together to talk about expelling large numbers of Germans with immigration background. And another, Vera Lengsfeld, talked as recently as 2019 about how white Germans are being replaced. So there is now an outcry from progressive publications for more transparency over donations and oversight over this culturally central building in the capital city of an ostensibly secular society.
A court in Berlin has figured out what all of us have known for a long time, which is that finding affordable rental housing in Berlin is almost impossible. The decision related to a case of someone getting evicted from their rental flat because of Eigenbedarf, which is the right of the owner of the flat to move renters out if they need to have it for themselves. The tenant appealed the decision decision, stating they had been unable to find affordable housing, presenting numerous failed applications for new flats. The court then incorporated this reasoning into its decision to extend the length of time for the tenant to find another apartment by 2 years. This could have a very significant effect on the rental market, as affordability in Berlin can now be taken into account when appealing eviction notices. So more ways to hold on to those old contracts, which is good.
So this was just something that I found fascinating. So Berlin's housing crisis actually made it into the UK Instagram meme world. I was sent a meme like last week with a baby in the picture, and the caption underneath was just me chilling out in 1991, not getting an old Berlin rental contract, which I thought was hilarious. Now, this is sent by someone who firstly doesn't rent a house at all. She actually owns her own home. She's one of the few of our generation who does. And she sent it to me from England. And I was like, how on earth? But on Instagram, apparently it's internationally known that we cannot afford our housing.
And you know why, Izzy? It's because we've got the 12th coolest street in the world.
That's it. It's done it. So the fallout from last year's so totally self-inflicted budget crisis, that was one of those issues that wasn't really an issue, but has been made into a major issue that could affect Germany for years and years to come, has also torpedoed a proposed budget of 5 billion euros that was going to be borrowed by the city of Berlin for climate protection over the next decade. For anyone who wasn't aware of the budget crisis happening on a federal level last year, basically Germany's highest constitutional court declared that 60 billion euros had been misallocated from a corona fund to pay for climate protection in the climate transition fund. This meant that the fund lost nearly a fifth of its budget, and massive cuts to climate protection were necessary. This is because Germany has a rule dating back to the Merkel years in around 2008 that says that it cannot borrow over a certain amount of GDP and not pay it back within a year. So at first, Berlin didn't think that it would be affected by this, but a legal opinion commissioned by the Black-Red government has now thrown water over the proposed 5 billion euros, saying it would be unconstitutional to raise the funds for investment in climate protection through debt. As taxation revenue is largely already designated, that leaves climate protection measures basically on a semi-permanent state on ice. But it plays into the CDU narrative of like climate protection means taking away money from your services, your hospitals, your buildings, you know. So, you know, the idea was to do it through debt so that we didn't have to take out of the city government's budget. But now the CDU can claim, well, if you want to do your climate protection, then you're going to get more schools. You know, this is going to play into 2026 election campaign.
So I still call it the O2 Arena. And for the last 8 years, it's been the Mercedes-Benz Arena. As of Friday, with the installation of a sign that is 34 meters wide, 5 meters high, and weighs 5.7 tons, there's a new official name, Uber Arena. There was a protest there, of course. Taxi drivers were out to point out that Uber doesn't really help them out at all. They were wearing like striped prisoner uniforms.
Has anyone told David Hasselhoff, by the way? Because he usually gets outraged about stuff changing in that part of the city.
I have not, honestly.
No, does anyone know what I'm referring to here? Do you remember when he came in like 2013 and he was like parading up and down that part of the wall to say, do not tear this wall down?
Right.
No?
I was not unable to reach out to his people for comment.
Just say next time.
Perhaps next episode, guys. You know, when I say surprise guest, you never know. So cab drivers were out protesting, dragging a cab covered in plastic bags while wearing prison uniforms and balls and chains around their ankles. The plastic garbage bags were removed from the taxi to reveal their slogan, which is "Taxi ist Kultur," which, I mean, sure. I mean, uber bad.
If they make it a techno taxi.
Right. Our taxis, our taxis, UNESCO World Heritage. But what they are protesting is what they consider illegal and unethical practices from the company and other services like it. In February, in fact, the transport policy spokesman for the Berlin SPD, Tino Schopf, said he estimated 2,000 vehicles of this Uber slash whatever types are on the road without proper documentation, and industry experts said that's probably right and possibly also an underestimation. Uber works a little differently in Germany than in other countries where they kind of are an intermediary but directly between the driver and the passenger. Here, there's a third party, which there's supposed to be oversight on those companies. The other thing that can happen right now is the German government has changed the laws so that minimum prices can be set for fares. But that's up to individual municipalities to do it, of which very few, including Berlin, have. It gets a little worse, by the way. So it's Mercedes-Benz Square is now Uber Square.
Uberplatz.
Uberplatz.
It's kind of important
Sure,
to
that's
say
right. Yeah, no, I was
properly.
mixing it. Uberplatz, which just has a very nice sort of dystopic feel to it. And the Verti Music Hall will now carry the glorious moniker of the Uber Eats Music Hall. That's right, Uber Eats Music. By the way, guys, you can just order cabs through an app. If you've got to use an app, you can still get a cab, and they'll do a better job, and they'll get there quicker, and you can support them while still using your telephone to get places. So yeah, it's debatable whether or not taxis are culture, but it seems pretty obvious to me that Uber is not. So, I mean, come on, Uber Eats Music.
It's so delightfully dystopian.
Did somebody
can you
say it out
imagine?
loud?
I wish somebody sat in the room and was like, okay, so what are we going to call the music hall? It's like, oh, it's still going to be a music hall, but it's going to be Uber Eats, because that's one of our companies.
Right.
Uber Eats Music. Yep. No, it sounds good.
Nailed it, yeah.
Nailed it. Write it down.
They haven't put up the sign yet, so maybe they have, like, they're not quite committed to it.
Oh dear. Finally, an update on the proposed fence around Görlitzer Park. There is no update. The project is currently ping-ponging between the city's central authority and the Kreuzberg-Friedrichshain municipality, which say they do not want to build the fence. The city government, specifically CDU Transport Secretary Manja Schreiner, says the city... Sorry, I have feelings about her. Says the city has the right to build a fence because the fence has not yet been built. Great, Manja. That is good reasoning. And Kreuzberg-Friedrichshain say the Central Berlin Authority has no right to build a fence because the problems around Görli are not a Berlin-wide problem and thus only applicable to their jurisdiction. This sets up the whole saga for a long-term legal battle that means for the foreseeable future, no fence. Listeners may remember our next guest from her visit to Radio Spätkauf in February 2020 to discuss Berlin's libraries and the Amerika Gedenkbibliothek, where we are currently recording. Please join us in welcoming to the stage the ZLB's Head of Public Services, Juliana Pranke.
Thank you.
We're in this fabulous new pop-up right here. Very exciting. It feels very much like we're in 2024. Can you tell us a little more about this space we're in?
Yeah, so we called it the pop-up. There were other names. Uber wasn't one of them. Okay. The Amerika Gedenkbibliothek, as I think I told the story last time, it was built in the 50s with a target group size of, let's say, 500 people per day in mind. And now, like before the pandemic, we had 3,500 per day.
Wow.
Now we're back to 2,000. So yeah, the infrastructure is basically not made for this amount of people. And we've had for the longest time the problem that there's never enough, seats and spaces for people to sit and also to do sort of programs and events. The common misperception is that libraries have to be quiet, but no, we want people to come together here and meet and speak, but we don't have the spaces. So a long time ago, somebody had the idea that the new central library that we've been rooting for 100 years now is also not happening. So let's do a temporary building. And initially we had the idea of putting a container in front of the library.
Right.
But yeah, 6 years later, it's not a container, it's an actual building, even though it's still temporary. So it's not made for eternity. But
Is this like a temporary to like get rid of all the permitting problems that you would have?
For listeners at home, Izzy was doing air quotes.
I was doing air quotes, yeah.
No, I think the idea is that eventually we will have a new building where, all of our problems are gone, and maybe I'll get to that later. But yeah, we're here. We're super happy. We opened last September. It's 800 square meters of space, and there's no, you don't see any books here. There's no CDs or whatever we have on the other side of the building, but it's just for things like this, and I'm super happy that you guys are here today.
Thank you. Yeah, the space doesn't feel temporary. I mean, I know it is permanent and it won't last generations, but it's full of a bunch of different rooms so you can have all kinds of different groups and activities. And there was people with prayer bells in some other room before we were recording, and we're here doing a podcast, and there's plenty of space to do your sort of co-working-esque behaviors.
Yeah, and we have a media workshop on the other side of the hall. So if you're interested in doing a podcast, you can in this other room, because we have audio and video equipment. You need to do a little introduction class sort of and get a not a driver's license, media workshop license, but it's easy. Basically, you just learn what is there. You can also go to the website and see all the equipment that we purchased, and then you book the room and you do your little podcast or video.
I saw a green
photo.
screen in there. You can pretend you're anywhere.
We still have some issues with the noise coming from Blücherstraße, but we're working on that. So hopefully.
That's absolutely incredible. What are library resources, such as what you just mentioned with the media room, that you wish more people knew about?
What maybe is a little bit new is that in our other branch in Breite Straße, because it's two buildings that make up the central library, we recently rearranged some of the things we have. So there's now a Gesundheitslesesaal, so a health reading hall, where we put all the media from like the medicine and sports books, and we plan to do also events there on health and mental health, and sitting is the new smoking and all that. And also over there we have the Berlin collection. So because we're not just the central library, but also the regional library for Berlin. So whatever is published here, any type of book or record or whatever, we collect. And it's quite substantial things that you can use and do research. And there's been some new people that have been hired and work on making all that information available in a cool and innovative way.
Yeah, I mean, it is sometimes feel like you kind of have to come physically to the place still to understand everything that's available. There's piano rooms here. There's like artwork you can hang on your walls. Am I being too much of a super fan? No, okay.
It's cute.
Next week we're getting another piano. It will be in the hall. So if you can play more than and you're very welcome to just go play something.
Cool. I can play krachong, plonk, ting, ting. No.
Well, somebody will stop you. Okay. And we will do also in the salon, which is over there, we will open a vinyl corner soon, I think in 2 or 3 weeks, with lots of records.
Also, the TV and film selection here is amazing. Like almost anything you want to watch, you can get.
And you mentioned this earlier, Dan, and you mentioned you just downloaded an audiobook for your child. What are the online resources that the ZLB offers?
Well, there's books and newspapers and magazines, and we have Netflix, so Film Friend is a website where you can watch lots of movies. There's music databases also. There's eNote. So, we have a music sheet collection here that's quite substantial if you sing at a choir or play music. But also now there's this eNote thing where you have all that.
Honestly, if you've gone through the trouble of downloading something so you can skip the paywall on whatever resource you want to read, you can not steal. You can just be part of a public accessible library. Now, what's coming up in the future for the library?
Well, like I said, the Central Library of Berlin consists of 3 buildings. It's this one, the one in Breite Straße, and then we have an outside depot sort of in Westhafen where, it's not accessible. It's just many more kilometers of media that's stored there. There's been plans to have one central library, one building forever. And the most recent attempts to build a new central library here stopped, sort of after the last re-election, or not a re-election, but the election repetition.
Yeah.
But Joe Cialo, the senator for culture, had an idea last year in August. He presented the idea that Q207, so the building on Friedrichstraße where the Lafayette, what is it?
Mall?
Mall,
warehouse,
Galleries Lafayette.
gallery. They're moving out, and this building will become empty at the end of the year, and it's perfect for a library.
Oh my
and
God.
It would be perfect for us, and we're super excited and super happy. Yeah, so, well, all that's missing now is money, of course.
What?
Well, what?
But what do you mean? It's already, the building's there. That's got to be cheaper than...
Let me just mention Capital B again. You could just take it. It worked for a year.
Right.
That's a thought.
I mean, who's going to fight librarians?
Yeah, it's like, librarians occupied this building. Like, get police, and everyone's just like quietly reading and having a
Right.
nice time and doing
go
housework.
Instead of going
I like
through
it.
the streets with the tractors, you could just
Yeah.
have those little book, those rolling book things.
Oh.
All right. No, she has
Okay.
real solutions
Wow.
to the problem, I think.
Good ideas.
Okay.
Well, actually, there were, financial discussions at the end of last year for the next household, and we were sort of hoping that, and there's been discussions of putting money in that household, but it didn't come through. So now Joe Cialo is in negotiations with the BIM, which is the legal entity in Berlin that sort of owns all the public service buildings. And they're looking for some way to make this financially happen. And we hope that maybe by Easter, maybe by Whitsun, there is going to be some sort of solution. So
you're not asking us for the money, but maybe we can support?
yes, you can support. You can all go to our website, and right on the main page, you will see a button for Unterschreiben. So it's a signature collection. So far, I think 12,000 people have signed, and yeah, we're looking for any kind of support. Or if if you hear about this, even though I think lots of people it has dropped from people's attention for the moment, unfortunately.
Sure.
But it's still happening, and we're still hoping that it will come through.
Well, 12,000 seems inadequate for a space that has 3,000 people coming through it a day. I think we can get this signature drive up. I mean, we have, but just with this podcast alone, there will be dozens more. So I am curious, though, the idea of a main central library, is that really important, or do we need to give more resources and support to all the small libraries that are all around town?
Both, of course.
Okay, right. It's a false dichotomy.
This is something, all the 12 district libraries, because we're in Berlin, so yeah, you have district libraries or library systems, even though we're all connected in one library association. All the 12 directors of the district libraries super support, the idea, because it shows from other countries. If you go to Helsinki or to Oslo, please go to their central libraries. They're fantastic buildings. You get goosebumps when you go in there. Or if you go to the Netherlands, it doesn't even matter which city, any place, go to the public library, because they're cool places. Yeah, so, and coming back to your question, it shows that if there's a central library that's, a great place and a welcoming environment, it also affects all the smaller libraries in the districts and so on. So they will benefit from this as well.
We'll put a link to the I forget how to say it, the petition on the show notes, so that you guys can get involved there.
ZLB.de for anyone like me who does not like going to show descriptions.
Very good. And it'll also be on our website. All right. Juliana, thank you so much for joining us and hosting us today.
You're very welcome, and please come back.
Okay,
Thank you
nice.
so much. Give it up for you.
Radio Spätkauf. Berlin news in English.
So our next guest is a wonderful person and a familiar voice to listeners. Who wrote that?
I wrote that.
This guest is more wonderful because he used to be a co-host with Radio Spätkauf. Please join in warmly welcoming back to Radio Spätkauf, Joeran Mandik. So firstly, where have you been? We miss you. Why don't you call more?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so happy to be back for a little one time only. Don't get your hopes up. I've just been doing other things, you know. I don't know. I guess after I did the podcast for like 8 years, you know. I think it was just time to put my energy elsewhere for a while.
You wanted to tell us about a project you've been working on.
Yeah, I asked to be on the show.
Yes.
I wasn't asked. I asked because I have a story that I want to tell you about a tree. Feel free to interrupt at any time if there's questions. But I think it'll be about 10 minutes of me just talking. Okay? Okay, so this tree, right? I read this book called Why Buddhism is True, which I was given by my ex-girlfriend's dad. It's a book...
Did you read it before or after Buddhism. The breakup?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not... Yeah. Before the breakup. Basically a book explaining basic Buddhist principles. And in that book, I read about a tree called the Bodhi tree, which is the tree that the Buddha sat under for 49 consecutive days, just meditating, and then became enlightened, right? So this Bodhi tree, very holy tree in Buddhism. And I was reminded of the story also of Newton sitting under a tree and the apple falling on his head, allegedly, and he came up with gravity as a principle. And then there's like all kinds of stories, right? Another one is like Odin from Norse mythology, who hung himself off the tree Yggdrasil and peered into this well to find the secrets of life, the runes, and then did after 9 days and 9 nights. So I felt like there was maybe something about trees that make us feel like closer to wisdom or enlightenment, whether these stories are true or not.
Right. You had the apple in the Garden of Eden.
True. It started.
Also on a tree.
Yeah, I assume that apple came from a tree. I don't.
Yeah. Right. Trees are everywhere in these stories. But anyway, I kind of got interested and looked at a bit more information about this Bodhi tree and found out that the actual species is called a Ficus religiosa. Sacred fig is the common name. Probably not perchance called that. And it's got this trunk that's like all these little trunks that are intertwined. Looks incredible. And it has these heart-shaped leaves with a very elongated tip, which actually help the tree shed the water more quickly to prevent rot, because it's a tropical tree. So it's native to South Asia and a bunch of places. Has been introduced elsewhere in the world. And so I thought, maybe is there a tree like this in Berlin? Yeah, and I can go visit it and maybe become wise.
Right.
So I remembered that there is an open data portal, FISBroker, for Berlin, that has a data set for all the street trees and another data set for all the park trees in Berlin. I queried those and found nothing, which was a bit disheartening. By this time, I had decided I'm going to take notes about this, you know. Then I kind of just haphazardly opened my browser and typed in, is there a sacred fig in Berlin, in German? Gibt's eine Pappelfeige in Berlin? And the first hit was a Tagesspiegel Potsdam article from 2018 that told the story of a cutting from a tree in Sri Lanka, a Bodhi tree, a sacred fig tree, being brought to Berlin as a present to the Buddhist community at the Buddhist house in Frohnau, which is in the far north, like edge of the city. And in the article, it told another story, which is that the tree that cutting was taken from was in fact itself a pretty special tree. The original tree that the Buddha sat under doesn't exist anymore, right? That was 2,600 years ago, that tree is dead. But in 236 BC, a nun, who was also the daughter of an emperor, she took a cutting from this original Buddha tree that the Buddha sat under and brought it to Sri Lanka and put it in the ground and planted it. So this is 2,300 years ago, roughly, and that tree still exists. And it's actually the oldest tree in the world where we know that it's been planted by people and when it's been planted. And of this tree, a cutting was brought to Berlin in 2018, and it happened to be the species that I was looking for. In the article, it said that after the long flight from Sri Lanka, the tree wasn't doing so well, bad weather, long flight, and it was brought to the Botanical Gardens in Potsdam to be nursed back to health. And then the article ended with the outlook of the tree being returned to the Buddhist house in Frohnau. I looked at this very recently, so this is a 6-year-old article, and I just figured, well, chances are it's now in Frohnau. And I went on their website and found out there's an event I can go to, like a lecture on Buddhism. And I took my little car and drove up there and timed it so I would have an hour beforehand to talk to people. I don't know if you've ever been to Frohnau, but Frohnau is like, there's all these villas. It's like pretty fancy.
Yeah.
And one of these villas is this Buddhist house on top of a hill, this Buddhist yellow house overlooking the rest of the neighborhood, sort of. And like there's just kind of ornamental wall and then a wooden gate, and it's all ornamental and stuff. And then stairs go up to this house. So I went up these stairs. Like downstairs there was a sign confirming this is in fact the Buddhist house, but then upstairs at the door, no sign whatsoever. And it was just kind of open. And I kind of walked in, no one was greeting me, but I heard some voices and there was a sign like, take your shoes off, put on these slippers. And I did that and followed the voices into the kitchen. So it was like I walked into someone's house. It was very weird. And there was 2 people sitting here to the left. And then as I entered the room further, there was just 3 monks in robes sitting behind tables and all smiling at me. So I was clearly welcome. I asked this question. I told the story of this article and asked the question, is this tree here? And they said, no. The tree's not here. The tree was here for like a day and is now in the Botanical Gardens in Steglitz. So I thought, okay, great. I guess I could have called ahead. But, you know, I wanted a day trip anyway, so that was good.
Also, this is the first time in 12 years that Frohnau's made it onto the podcast, so
shout out to Frohnau, yeah, true. Anyway, I was early, so I asked them if I could walk around the property, and I did. And they have it's like a pretty big property and these meditative paths through trees and no sacred figs anywhere, I can confirm. I noticed that all the windows had these wrought iron grates in front of them, decorated with these leaves that are heart-shaped with an elongated tip. And that was the first time I saw something at least representing this type of tree I was looking for, right? I was like, okay, this is good.
That was a
this
clue.
Is material. Yeah, I got a clue. And then I listened to the lecture, and honestly, it was very deeply Buddhist stuff, and it went over my head, I think, mostly. Next thing I do is email the Botanical Gardens in Steglitz to ask about this tree, and I did, and they got back to me a few days later and said, yes, there's 3 sacred figs in their tropical house. I can come visit any time. And then someone else emailed back in a separate email saying, and I also double-checked, but none of these trees are from Sri Lanka. At that point, of course, knowing that there is somewhere a tree from Sri Lanka, I was like, no, I need that tree. Like, I'm not satisfied with just any fucking tree of that species. So I didn't even go to Steglitz, and instead found that article again, and then found another article.
Just to interrupt really quickly, I just want to remind everyone, Yuri said he was too busy to do the podcast.
New projects, you know. So I found another article that told the same story of the tree being nursed back to health in Potsdam, and also mentioned the name, Dr. Michael Burkhardt. And I went on the website of the Botanical Gardens in Potsdam and found out he still works there. He's like a researcher. Emailed him with the same question, and he emailed back right away and said, yes, the tree is here. You can come visit. And I was like, yes, I found this tree. But he said also that he was on holidays, and so when I asked him where exactly is this tree in this giant garden of yours, he didn't reply anymore. But I went anyway. The next chance I got, I brought a friend with. We drove down to Potsdam, and then were faced with the dilemma of finding this tree. Right? It's a big garden. But if you remember, in Steglitz they were in the tropical house, so I figured it's a tropical tree, it should be inside. And so we went in there, and €2 entrance, good price. That's full price. Full adult price is €2. I can recommend going. But the young person working there had no idea what I was talking about. Like, didn't even know the type of tree I was talking about, where it could be, nothing. Also didn't have access to their database. She said, oh, just go in. We went in and saw a bunch of ferns and a bunch of palm trees and a bunch of cacti and a bunch of tropical Nutzpflanzen. My friend who I was with was super hungover. I was really tired, so we decided to take a break. There was a vending machine that was selling cola, so we got one and thought it would be fun to go drink this at the cola tree that we'd seen earlier.
Is that like wearing the band's T-shirt to the concert?
And so pushed open this door that we thought had the cola tree behind it, and my friend entered first and I was behind and looked to my left and saw heart-shaped leaves with an elongated tip. I got excited and I peered down to the base of the tree and found a little black Buddha statue sitting there. And I was like, this has to be the tree. And then there was a little tag in the ground that said, Sacred Fig, Ficus Religiosa, Sri Lanka. So we have found it.
Wow.
And it's so incredible to me that, like, this tree, right, it's a straight line back to Buddha. It's like 2 degrees removed. It's like literally the same DNA tree to this like super holy being in the world, right? And it's not acknowledged, it's not signposted, no one even knows that it's there except the one guy who I emailed with. I feel like I've unlocked a legitimate pilgrimage site. Huh?
Maybe. By the way, listeners at home, I added all those sound effects later of the walking and the bells ringing and stuff.
Yeah,
in case you're wondering like how we did that, but that's all in post. I wanted to verify this story, so I tried to track down that researcher.
You guys have a lot of time on your hands.
Let me finish the story. I wanted to fetch on the researcher that you had emailed with down there, and they said he hadn't worked there in 20 years. Can you believe that, guys? Ghost noise. No, that was not true. Okay, yeah, that was a bit.
Absolutely untrue. No, but I guess it was a fun journey. Went to Frohnau, went to Potsdam, found this tree. Of course, we then sat down at the base of it for 5 minutes meditating while people were walking around us. It was very embarrassing. But yeah, if you wanna connect with the Buddha, go to Potsdam.
Are you gonna move to make this a tourist attraction? What do you think?
I don't know. I guess I should email Michael Burkhardt again. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I don't know who's in charge of.
Someone should put a sign there.
I bet if you walk in there with a laminated plaque and a little stake and you stuck it in there, no one's gonna stop you.
Yeah, we're really into guerrilla stuff today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't become wise, by the way, from meditating under it for 5 minutes, but it was fun. Thanks for letting me tell my story.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Jöran.
Yuri.
So it's been nearly a year since the Black-Red Coalition came to power in Berlin, and we got our first CDU mayor in over 2 decades. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to do a kind of state of the CD Union. You see why I did that. 1 year on, what have been the major stories, and now how have the coalition tried to tackle the major issues facing the city? So Berlin's biggest issue by far is the lack of affordable housing. The coalition has decided that the answer to the lack of affordable housing is to build more housing and do it faster. All good so far. This is basically what everyone says. The key is how. The government's answer, cutting red tape. And specifically, they want to get rid of the myriad of regulations around conserving nature when approving projects. Critics point out that the slowdown in house building has very little to do with nature conservation, but instead higher interest rates, a lack of skilled workers, and high construction costs after years of high inflation. So if I was to make a prediction in terms of affordable housing, I think it will not have been improved by 2026. Their other big offer to the housing crisis has been a rabid, and I have to say inexplicable, obsession with wanting to build on Tempelhof.
Nice.
Our time's up, I guess.
That is the same. That beep. I know that ring from something.
School.
Is it? That can't be more.
I
at
think
my
it's
school.
hospital.
Oh, it's the hospital
Yeah.
announcement. Yeah.
So yeah, the idea that they've already floated, and maybe we can figure out why they're so obsessed with Tempelhof, but they have already floated the idea of readjusting or re-adjudicating another referendum on whether to build on Tempelhof or not. And the latest ploy is to open up Tempelhof to allow more refugee housing to incorporate into areas protected from development. So in order to do this, the Parliament would have to amend the Tempelhof Act from 2014 to allow more permanent and semi-permanent structures on recreational parts of the Feld. And the immediate risk is that sports facilities on the northwest side of the field will be destroyed, including basketball and volleyball courts, as well as the Kabawatsi Circus.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe a genius plan on their end in order to break the taboo of building housing on the Feld, right? If refugees can get affordable housing on the Feld, why can't you? And then on top of that, destroy much loved and used sports facilities to undermine solidarity in a rather lefty part of town.
Yeah, and we already covered a couple of episodes ago how the government itself commissioned a report trying to find space in the city for more areas for new buildings, and they found that the city had over 230, or space for over 230,000 apartments without touching the Feld. So yeah, it's a bit of a mystery to me why they're so obsessed with the Feld. Does anyone have any why?
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about the location, but I think it's also because it's one of the living proofs of direct democracy with a referendum in Berlin. And they are trying so hard to fight every referendum that is being passed through.
Right,
So
that's the only one that's worked.
Right. So in order, like, they're like, it's you got democracy, well, we got power, and so they're like, if we can take down this referendum, then why put in the effort to fight?
I think it's also just a lack of creativity.
Yeah,
like
they're
you
like,
just,
"It's
I mean, you have
space,
people
I
that
see space,
they just go
up a
back
building."
to the same solutions that, you know, that they've thought of in the past. It's also just a thing you see and it's empty, right? Like a lot of the empty spaces in Berlin are not, you just don't drive by them on your way to work.
Right.
And so, you know, if you would like, you're like looking for a place to put a condo, you're like, well, how about there? I mean, there's a lot of empty space that's to the south of the city where more buildings are are looking to be approved.
But I think the problem is in the verbiage of calling it empty space. Tempelhofer Feld is not empty space. It is lived in space. It is space that is used recreationally. It is space that is really important for community building, community gardening. I mean, we've spoken about it in the show so many times. Sports, and so I think we need to stop calling it climate. Absolutely,
Right.
It's really important for the climate of Berlin.
Animal sanctuary.
Sanctuary. We need to stop calling it empty space.
Well,
It's
or maybe we have
not
to stop
empty space.
stigmatizing the word empty. You know, I mean, I have a friend who went to the Bodhi tree, and you have inner emptiness. Emptiness in a more, I think you've got a very
So moving on to transport.
Another major bugbear in the city, CDU came into office on an anti-bike and pro-car platform. The reforms they are instituting are rather in keeping with that rhetoric. Finishing off the A100 motorway, yay. Bringing back 50 kilometers an hour for a lot of roads that were converted to 30 zones under the previous Green Transport Ministry. So the roads were brought down to 30 kilometers an hour to improve air quality, which has now been improved. Ergo, they are now going to go back to 50.
Mission accomplished.
So,
put up the banner.
Honestly, I have not yet found the hole in their logic. That is going to affect also the 12th coolest street in the world, Oranienstraße, will go back to 50 kilometers an hour, which to any single human being, yes, hang on a
That's
second.
not possible.
Yes, it is possible.
No, you read that wrong.
I'm not.
Oh, God.
Honestly, it's true. And to anyone who has ever ridden their bike on Oranienstraße, which is already kind of like, Hermannstraße will also go back to 50. Yes, and obviously Hermannstraße will go back to 50 kilometers an hour, and for anyone who does ride their bike on Hermannstraße, you know that the bike path was done for a certain point and then it stops. That will not be continued. It is one of the bike lanes that has been cancelled by Manja Schreiner. So wherever the bike lanes that you like end, that is where they now end. That is done. You enjoy that bit that you get, you have fun on it, and the rest of the time you pray to not die.
When's the next election again?
2026.
2026. So it is kind of, but I'm sorry. I need to have my little traffic moment. So the problem is obviously this anti-bike rhetoric is making it also in the way that cyclists are being currently treated in the city. There has been so much more aggression. There has been so much more dangerous positions that cyclists have been put in. And what I want to say, laut Straßenverordnung, you do not have to ride on a bike lane unless there is a blue sign with a white bicycle on it. That means you have to use the bike lane. If that is not on there, you can ride on the street. However, if that sign is on there and the bike lane is in really bad condition, like it's dangerous for you to ride on the bike lane, you can also ride on the street. Although I was attacked recently for doing that by someone who just really needed to tell me how to live my life. And I was like, if only she saw my apartment, she would have so much more to say. But
the CDU does have an idea, a big infrastructure idea for how to improve public transport. So they're not out of ideas yet.
They are not out of ideas, but I just like to talk about the way that the CDU does like to find ideas, which is they go home and they open their diaries and they flip back to like 1989. And that's where they got to this idea, which is to build a magnetic levitation train, the Maglev project, somewhere in the city. They don't know where yet. They just had that idea. It's kind of like their wet dream policy. It's a large infrastructure project that increases public transport, but doesn't touch the right of cars to roam all square footage of the road. But don't get too excited. It's not a new invention. Yeah, it was a project that CDU administration had in the early 90s, and obviously it failed. It was mothballed under the last CDU mayor, Eberhard Diepgen, lovely guy. But then again, I mean, if the CDU really needs the Maglev to be okay, give it to them. I don't know. Like, if it's gonna make them sleep at night, let's get the
Maglev based? Like, who's getting the money if we build a Maglev?
Oh, you're blaming Big Magnet?
Is it a buddy thing?
It's Big Maglev.
So from what I understand, there's like 1 or 2 companies that actually do procurement for Maglev technology. And
I think Disney makes them.
They estimate that there's...
I think Uber does.
They estimate that it's something like 15 million euros per kilometer, and that, in terms of estimation, is way, way higher than anything that the CDU have come out with. So, yeah, they're underestimating the cost of it, and it sounds more like like an election slogan rather than a real...
Sounds like cronyism.
It's just
possibly.
It sounds cool. What if we got those things like, you know, when you go into the dry cleaners and they have that thing that like there's like that just brings all the clothes around on like a little upside down train track. Mm-hmm. We could have those running, and then you could be on a bike or walking, or you could just kind of hook on like with like a reverse Mary Poppins sort of situation, and then just sort of ride. I mean, that would be so cheap.
And it wouldn't interrupt car traffic.
That's true.
That's the important thing.
If you had it high enough.
You got to have it high enough.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so that's the big ideas coming out of this administration. So yeah, when is the next election? We've got another 2 years of this administration for sure. And the question, I guess, on many people's lips is, how is the SPD responding to this? Because as many of you maybe remember from last year, the SPD was quite split on whether to go into coalition with the CDU or not. So they narrowly voted to go into the coalition, 54%. With 54% of the vote. The youth organization of the SPD, the Jusos, were very vocal against that decision last year and have been quite vocally against what the black-red government have been doing since. And now the party is in a 3-way race to elect a new set of chairpeople, a chairperson duo, to lead the Berlin SPD party. And there are 3 duos in contention. So I thought I'd just give you a little rundown of who they are. Because this will have a huge effect on politics going forward. So, the first is my district mayor, Neukölln's district mayor, Martin Hickel, who, if anyone's ever seen him, has anyone ever seen him? He gave me my citizenship, and he is huge, like mighty big. He's about 7.5 meters tall. That is true. He's about 7.5 meters tall. And the picture of me getting my citizenship from is like this tiny little woman. I'm not that small, but a tiny little woman, just like, thank you very much.
Hobbit end situation.
He's running alongside former Sports State Secretary Nicola Burkert-Gianni.
I think it's Giannini.
How tall are they?
Not as tall as him.
Okay.
So they come from the right of the party, traditionally aligned with possibilities presented by CDU coalitions, and they are described by some as CDU light, and have a lot in common with their close political bedfellow, Franziska Giffey. The second duo is also from the centre-right of the party, the incumbent co-head of the state, Raed Saleh, and the district councillor, Louise Lehmann, from Marzahn-Hellersdorf. Anyone know anything about those two?
Never heard her name.
The third duo is the wild card. The wild card entry. So they are vastly popular on social media and amongst the youth wing of the party, the Jusos, but seen as more outsider candidates by party leadership. This is Kian
Nierumand and Jana Bertus.
Kian is also the name of my son, so obviously I'm going to vote for him. So 33 and 35, respectively, they are the youngest duo, and they are from the left of the party. So they talk about bringing the party back together again as a priority of theirs, and their natural political alliances would be built with the left and the Greens.
Well, what's left of the left?
Do you know what? I think this is a really good idea to have these 3 teams competing. I'm like kind of hooked for the drama of this. Like when we talk about politics like that, sometimes my eyes glaze over a little bit. But like, This is exciting. Like,
Well, the first round is happening
are they
next
do like a casting
week.
show, public debate?
Oh, they're doing.
Races?
They had like a meeting last week where they all like put forward their little platforms and they all sat on a stage together and there was like 3 duos and it was sort of like it was
like a
backstabbing who?
uninspired.
Has anyone slept with anyone
And
yet?
now presenting for the further left side of the party, we have got Kian and Yana ready to fight Martin Hicker, the tallest man alive. But let's not forget our underdog duo, Louisa Lehmann and Raid Saleh.
Maybe 2 of them will gang up on the third team.
I mean,
So we will find out by the 18th of May.
yeah.
If you're interested in this, and you should be interested in this because it's got a lot of implications for the next 2 years, you know. So the remaining next 2 years of the Black-Red coalition will be determined by who wins this leadership race. The CDU, you're probably not surprised in hearing this, is quietly backing Martin.
Could we quickly
Tallest
become
man on
members
earth.
of the SPD to then vote?
Well, yeah. I mean,
And then
There's
peace out.
18,000 members of the Berlin SPD, and they don't do polling on them very much. So it's really a black box. No one knows how left or how right.
Maybe we
this,
should become
this
members
membership
and
is.
sway the vote.
Well, as an American, I can't vote for anyone who 33 and 30. I need my politicians to be older than the invention of color television. That's what I'm looking for.
Jöran, thank you very much. A final thank you for being with us and for
Thank you so much
sticking.
for having me back. This was very fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Is this the end? And the wrap up for good. While we're resetting here, I just want to thank everyone who heard our call for donations on the last episode. It's really fantastic. We will lose money doing this if you don't support us. And so I thank you. There's a lot of costs involved in doing this show. If you appreciate it and would like to make a one-time or ongoing donation, that'd be fantastic. If you have a local business that you would like to get in the ears of listeners all around this city, we're happy to pass along your messages in exchange for money. But now, please join me in welcoming to the stage our next guest. He is a designer and former social worker. In 2016, he created KnowDrugs, an app that provides outreach workers and people who use psychoactive substances with access to the results of drug checks, as well as information about various substances. Please join me in welcoming to Radio Spätkauf, Philipp Kreicarek.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is very much ours. Tell us about KnowDrugs. What does it do, and how did it get started?
KnowDrugs is a mobile app you can download on the App Store or Play Store, and it basically has 4 main features. So 1, you can check out recent drug checking results. Drug checking, for those who are not familiar, basically you can hand in a bit of your drug to find out what is inside. That's always like coupled with a counseling session, and the aim is to reach people through social work, through counseling you might not otherwise reach. And those results are regularly published. There is drug checking in Berlin since 1 year. We have it in major European cities, and those published results you can find in the app. That's one thing. Second thing is you can read about psychoactive substances, like what's common dosage ranges, what are effects, what are side effects, how to reduce harms. The third feature is emergency advice, so what to do in a drug-related emergency so that people are prepared. And the fourth thing you can find in the app is where can I get help if I am struggling with drugs? And also where can I get my drugs tested?
So what inspired you to start this project?
So as I mentioned, we have now drug checking in Berlin since 1 year, which means before there was no drug checking. There was no drug checking in Germany at all. And what social workers did to kind of inform people about dangerous pills going around was kind of print out like a picture of a pill and then like tiny text and then putting that somewhere on a festival site or somewhere in the club where no one can see it. And that was the way to kind of, raise awareness about maybe dangerous batches of pills that are going around. And I always wondered, how effective is that? And also because of the fact that there was no way in Germany to get your drugs tested, I thought, okay, what about if we take all the drug checking results from various cities, put that into like one place so you don't have to like type in like the address, but have it in an app to make that accessible in a moment when people actually need it. Did some qualitative research, kind of seemed to work very well, and then kind of slowly got the project started.
So how much of the data in the app comes from other cities?
The focus is on Europe, and obviously since Berlin started drug checking, like I guess people from Berlin are most interested in the results from Berlin. But another big contributor is like Switzerland. I mean, they have had like drug checking for, 10, 20 years. So there's Zurich, Bern, Basel, Biel, and also Austria with Vienna, Innsbruck, and now Graz.
I get nervous just giving my email address to the pantsstore.com. For now, we're getting into stuff that's illegal and sensitive and personal. Like, how does the app deal with the authorities or our relationship to them?
I mean, that was one of my big questions at the beginning as well. Would people actually download such an app, especially if they do it through a Play Store? And I was surprised to see people started to leave comments like, hey, this is great, but I want to have this feature. Or, well, this doesn't quite work, which for a person who's developing an app, that's super valuable advice. But obviously that kind of showed me, okay, people might not be as, maybe scared as I was myself. But having said that, the fact that you have the app on your phone doesn't say that you're doing anything illegal. It's purely educational. It does not require any user input. Like, it does not ask you, what did you take last weekend or so? Basically, you just consume the information, which makes it pretty safe.
So it's a bit more focused on party drugs, and is there a reason why other street drugs, such as heroin, are not included on it?
That's mainly determined by the fact that those drug checking organizations mostly test like party drugs because their service is frequented by people who are into party drugs. And I guess that's also like the target group that they determine. So of course, you can read about all kinds of opioids, heroin, methadone, and all this kind of stuff in the app as well. But when you look at the alerts, it is determined by what the organizations publish.
You're not doing the testing yourself, but
No.
I would think social workers or testing organizations could go out and procure the stuff themselves. Like, do you know, is there a reason why we rely on people bringing in their own supply?
The purpose of drug checking is really not to gain like an understanding of what is available on the market, what is like purity or stuff, because that's being done by law enforcement anyway. Whenever they confiscate something, they analyze, they do not publish or share, of course.
But couldn't they?
I guess it's the nature, of how they're operating. They don't want to generate a benefit. Actually, like they have their agenda.
Okay, I thought about it that way. Berlin police's top 10 pills.
I'm sure they have this kind of data, but they are not sharing. So the purpose of drug checking is less about gathering the data, but getting people into a conversation, people you might not otherwise reach, and also like reducing barriers amongst those people.
Right.
Because they might have been there, they might have had a nice conversation, non-judgmental, they know if they ever will feel like they're not doing well with drugs or without, this is a place where they can go.
What are some of the biggest dangers that listeners should know about or that come up particularly in drug checking?
What's the biggest danger or misconception, I think, is that some people think that one ecstasy pill is one dose. It used to be like that maybe 10, 20 years ago. Nowadays, one ecstasy pill is usually more like 2 or 3 doses, which, if you're not used to it, can be lethal. And those cases happened, especially when it happens to people who might just come to Berlin to party, might not otherwise deal with the topic of drugs a lot, might not be that informed. So that's something that the app tries to educate about. Look what's going on the market. Every single of those pills is very high dose. And second thing is, even if one pill looks like another, you can never be sure, so use drug checking.
And then I first came across you when there were big headlines a couple months ago. Pill tests positive for fentanyl. Fentanyl's here in Berlin. And I got in touch to find out if that's true. Do you want to get to the conclusion of that story?
Yeah. So actually it was a post on Reddit where someone had it was supposed to be 4-MMC methadone kind of stimulant, and this person tested with fentanyl test strip, you can do like at home. The test turned out positive, and it started like a big craziness on social media. People running around afraid, people putting affiliate links to Amazon to buy test kits like crazy and stuff. The thing is, those test strips, they can turn out false positive if they are not applied correctly and so on. So the sample in question was handed over to Berlin drug checking. They analyzed it in the lab with utmost care, and it turned out it was negative. So as of now, there is no indication that fentanyl is found, or that party drugs are laced with fentanyl. However, in heroin, fentanyl has been found over the past few years. So, well, it is there, but not in the party drugs.
Not yet.
Yeah.
We haven't had a positive test for one.
Exactly.
At least.
Exactly.
So
That's what
it
we
could
can
still.
say.
I mean, it's worth being cautious that it could be there.
Absolutely.
What are some other issues that can come up with drug checking if it isn't fentanyl? Aside, you said the dosage.
I mean, what we see a lot is that people think they bought, well, you know, it can be an ecstasy pill that then contains a different substance. But there's the most crazy confusions that you see. Like you can see that in the app or also on the website of Drug Checking Berlin, like sold as or bought as, and then what is actually inside. So sometimes, you know, it says like ketamine, then it's cocaine. Sometimes it says like 3 MMC and then it's 2 MEC, and you don't even know how those new psychoactive substances work. So
Right.
I think, again, the message here is you can never be sure, even if it looks the same, smells the same, whatever. If you analyze it, that will reduce the risk
Right.
of overdose, unwanted effects.
Can you still just rub it on your teeth? I mean, everything I know about this I learned from Lethal Weapon movies.
Well, again, like, you know, people think, oh, that's good coke if it numbs like your tongue or so. No, it can be just lidocaine or procaine that just numbs. Actually, very
wow.
dangerous when cocaine that is laced with lidocaine or procaine is injected. That is usually.
I know lidocaine's dangerous from the Princess Bride, right? Okay, so how is the app supported?
Well, good question. I don't even know myself. No, I mean, people can support the app by purchasing like the dark mode. I mean, I would say as a product designer, dark mode is a feature that you would expect any modern app to have. However, you know, it's like the only stream of income at the moment. It's basically covers like 1% of the costs.
Is
So
dark mode like it goes on the dark internet, or?
no, the UI turns dark. You
Oh, it
know,
looks
like
dark.
in
Okay,
the
yeah.
like. Well,
Got it.
Yeah. So again, it's a feature I think should be there, but yeah, well, that's one way like how you can like support the app. However, it's not enough at all. The numbers of users are increasing. I mean, at the moment we are like around 80,000 people use the app regularly, which means at least once a month. And yeah, I'm kind of looking for ways to finance that project and continue the work because there's a lot of stuff to do.
Have you gotten positive feedback from some of the people that benefit from the existence of the clubs that get a lot of bad press every time someone ODs in them? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people who really get a lot of benefit out of these. What about drug dealers?
Well, I haven't spoken to any about the app so far, but I mean, I would encourage also them to get their stuff tested. Can't be bad, right? When it comes to feedback, I mean, well, obviously, like social workers, outreach workers, peer projects use the app also like on site, so that the app acts as an intermediary, so that it's not like I tell you what is good and bad, but like here's a neutral thing that we can look at together. And I mean, I was happy to see that Berghain also put it on their website under the awareness section and
That's
recommends
amazing.
the app.
Wow, you got into Berghain. That's very tough.
I didn't even have to pay them.
That's great. Yeah, I think one other thing that's great about the app, like as I went through, I don't go to clubs. There were drugs on there I'd never heard of. I think it's like as something that like a lot of us interact with on a daily basis, even if we're not in clubs or just on the U-Bahn. It was interesting for me to know, like, oh, maybe that's what that guy was on, or also like what to do when you see certain situations, because again, like I get all of my information about this from movies in the 80s. So like I think it's like actually really valuable to peruse, like even if this isn't a part of what you do, or I interact with young people and they're you know in the green room of comedy shows exchanging information about drug safety, and then I can, as the old guy, be like, well, I know all about MEC3PO.
Star Wars reference there.
Good
Thank
job,
you.
Dan. Actually, no, it's ironic to mention that I was out with my students and they were telling me a bunch of party drugs they did last night, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know any of these. I need to go read. And then I had to hide from them and Google it in the bathroom.
Or just accept life moves on. I think I did that a while back.
No,
I'm
it's
fine
not
with
that
it.
I wanted to say, ooh, give me some. I just wanted to not seem like their old teacher that didn't know. And
I'm
now
fine
I
with
will-
being that teacher now.
Yeah, now I will download the app and
types.
be like, aha, well.
You can surprise them with
I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna
very specific knowledge.
And then they're gonna be like, oh great, she's teaching us again. Thank you so much,
Thank you so
for
much.
being here, and
Thanks for
everyone
having me.
download KnowDrugs.
Please do.
All right.
Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you.
Radio Spätkauf.
This brings us to the events and ongoing recommendations. The Arab Film Festival has got dates between the 24th and the 30th of April. The festival describes itself as being Here is Elsewhere, Palestinian in Arab cinema and beyond, which delves into the complexities of the Palestinian cause, exploring themes of solidarity, self-exploration, compassionate encounters through a diverse array of Arab and international film productions. There's always a lot of amazing film festivals that come through. This is one that caught my eye as we were putting this together. I would also highly recommend coming by the Wall Comedy Club on Friday, April 5th. I'm going to be hosting a show with literally one of the best lineups I put together. It'll be great.
Yeah, keep coming to my shows if you speak German. I do a lot of German stand-up. If you don't, come to Comedy Cafe Berlin for improv shows. All of that is shared on my Instagram, so follow me there at Mati Kaiser.
And now just to thank the fantastic America Dank Bibliothek for hosting us. Thank you very much. Thanks to our guests, Jöran, Juliana, and Philipp for coming on. Thanks to all those who are donating. Please tell your friends about the podcast and leave us a nice review on your podcast platform.
And thank you to our wonderful live audience today.